Watched you give Marcus and Natalie everything they needed and more. You have paid their rent, their debts, their tuition over and over again. I never asked for that help because I learned early that I wasn't going to get it. I built my career and my financial stability entirely on my own. Victoria, my father started, but I held up my hand. Please let me finish. When I finally was in a position to help, to give back to this family in a meaningful way, you rejected it. You called it insulting and inappropriate. But how is it different from all the times you've helped Marcus and Natalie? Is it just because I'm supposed to be the self-sufficient one who doesn't need anything and doesn't get to give anything either? The room fell silent. Natalie looked uncomfortable. Marcus stared at the floor. I looked at each of them. I'm not saying what I did was right, but I'm asking you to understand why I felt like I had to do it this way. You have never made space for me to be part of this family in a meaningful way except when it's convenient and doesn't threaten anyone's pride. My mother's eyes were wet. We didn't realize you felt that way. How could you not? I asked, my own voice breaking now. I have been invisible in this family unless I was causing problems or needed to be quiet so someone else could shine. The attorney cleared her throat. Perhaps we should focus on the practical resolution and deal with the emotional issues in family therapy. She was right. We spent the next hour negotiating. In the end, we reached an agreement that no one loved, but everyone could accept. I would retain ownership of the house, but I would draft a will immediately leaving it to be divided equally among the 3 siblings upon my death. My parents could continue living there, paying only a nominal rent that covered insurance and taxes, essentially what they would have paid anyway. If and when they were ready to move into something smaller, we would discuss the next steps together. In exchange, they acknowledged in writing that I had prevented foreclosure and acted with the intent to help, even if my methods were flawed. And we all agreed to attend family therapy to address the deeper issues that this situation had brought to light. It wasn't perfect. There was no tearful reconciliation, no immediate forgiveness. But it was honest, more honest than our family had been in years. As the meeting concluded and the attorney left, my family and I sat in awkward silence. Finally, Natalie spoke up. I think I owe you an apology too. You have always been there when I needed help, and I never really thought about what you needed or how you felt. I'm sorry. Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, me too. I guess I never thought about how different things were for you. My parents looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then my father spoke. We failed you in many ways, Victoria. We made assumptions about what you needed and didn't need. You seemed so capable, so independent, that we thought you were fine. But that wasn't fair. Every child deserves to feel equally valued. My mother wiped her eyes. I'm not ready to say everything is okay, but I am sorry for how we made you feel over the years. And I'm sorry for uninviting you to Easter. That was petty and hurtful. It was a small crack in the wall that had been between us, but it was a start. Over the following months, we attended family therapy sessions. It was uncomfortable and sometimes painful, but it was also illuminating. We discussed patterns that had been set decades ago, roles that each of us had been assigned or had claimed. The golden child, the baby, the invisible middle child. We talked about how financial help had been distributed unequally and how that had created resentment and assumptions. My parents began to understand how their behavior had affected me. My siblings began to recognize their own privilege within the family dynamic. And I began to understand that while my intentions had been good, my methods had replicated the same pattern of making decisions for others without including them, the same thing I had resented my parents for doing to me. I also learned something surprising. My parents had rejected my initial offer not just out of pride, but because they genuinely didn't understand how bad their financial situation was. They had been in denial, hiding the problem even from each other to some extent. My offer had forced them to confront reality, and they had lashed out in fear and shame. Understanding didn't erase the hurt on either side, but it created space for healing. Today, a year after that explosive Easter, my relationship with my family is different. It's not the picture-perfect family that exists only in movies, but it's real and it's improving. My parents still live in the house, and I visit regularly without the tension that used to permeate every gathering. Marcus has actually started paying back some of the money my parents lent him over the years, inspired by our family discussions about fairness and responsibility. Natalie and I have grown closer. We talk on the phone weekly now, something we never did before. Most importantly, I'm no longer invisible. My achievements are acknowledged. My perspective is valued. When I visit, I'm welcomed genuinely, not just tolerated. It's not perfect, and there are still moments of old patterns creeping in, but we're all trying. The house itself has become a symbol of something different than I intended. I thought it would represent my grand gesture, my ability to save the day. Instead, it represents the complexity of family, the difficulty of helping people who don't want to be helped, and the importance of communication over unilateral action, no matter how well-intentioned. I've learned that you can't force people to accept your help or your love. You can only offer it honestly and respect their autonomy to accept or reject it. I've also learned that being right legally or practically doesn't mean you've done the right thing emotionally or ethically. If I could go back, would I do it differently? Yes. I would have confronted my parents directly when I discovered the foreclosure, laid out the facts, and insisted we find a solution together, even if that meant watching them squirm with discomfort at needing my help. But I can't go back. I can only move forward with the lessons I've learned. To anyone watching this who has complicated family dynamics, who feels invisible or undervalued, who struggles with wanting to help people who won't accept it, I want you to know that you're not alone. Family is messy. Love is complicated. Good intentions can lead to bad outcomes, and bad situations can sometimes lead to necessary conversations that should have happened years ago. The most important thing I've learned is that real love and real help require humility on both sides. The humility to ask for and accept help when you need it, and the humility to offer help in a way that respects the other person's dignity and autonomy. My parents will never own that house again in the legal sense. But in every way that matters, it's still their home. And maybe that's what I was trying to secure all along, not ownership, but belonging. Not control, but connection. Sometimes the most important thing we can do for family isn't to solve their problems, but to stand beside them while they solve their own, offering support without taking over, giving help without removing dignity. That's what I'm still learning. And maybe, in time, that house will become not a symbol of conflict, but of the family we're building together, one honest conversation at a time. If this story resonated with you, please share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever tried to help family members who rejected your help? How did you navigate that? And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about real family dynamics and the lessons we learn along the way. I'm Victoria, and at 29 years old, I never imagined I would be standing at my childhood home's front door, listening to my own mother tell me I wasn't welcome anymore. What she didn't know was that 3 months earlier, I had done something that would change everything. But before I reveal that twist, let me take you back to where this all began. If you're watching this from somewhere where family dynamics get complicated, take a moment to like and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. My parents, Linda and Richard, had 3 children, my older brother Marcus, me, and my younger sister Natalie. From as early as I can remember, there was an unspoken hierarchy in our household. Marcus could do no wrong as the eldest son, and Natalie was the baby who needed constant attention and support. I fell somewhere in the middle, expected to be self-sufficient and undemanding. When I was 10, I won first place in the regional science fair with a project I had worked on for months. My parents attended, but left immediately after my presentation to take Natalie to her friend's birthday party. When Marcus graduated high school with mediocre grades, they threw him a massive celebration and bought him a car. When I graduated as salutatorian 2 years later, we had a small dinner at home, and the conversation centered mostly on Marcus's new job. I learned early that if I wanted something, I needed to get it myself. So that's exactly what I did. At 16, I started working at a local coffee shop, saving every penny I could. Through high school and college, I worked multiple jobs, paid my own tuition, and built a life on my own terms. My parents offered minimal support, always explaining that Marcus was struggling to find his footing or Natalie needed help with her expenses. By the time I was 25, I had graduated with a degree in software engineering and landed a job at a major tech company in Seattle. The pay was excellent, and I was good at what I did. Really good. Within 2 years, I had been promoted twice and was earning more than I had ever imagined possible growing up in our modest middle-class household. Meanwhile, my siblings continued their patterns. Marcus bounced between jobs, each one supposedly his big break that never materialized. My parents helped with his rent, his car payments, and his credit card debt. Natalie dropped out of college twice, and each time, my parents paid for her to re-enroll somewhere new. They never asked me for help financially, but they also never asked how I was doing or celebrated my achievements. The house I grew up in was a classic colonial in a decent neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon. My parents had bought it 35 years ago when prices were reasonable. It was nothing fancy, but it was home. The creaky third step on the staircase, the kitchen window that never quite closed properly, the oak tree in the backyard where we had hung a tire swing. Despite everything, I had good memories there, and part of me still felt connected to that place. 2 years ago, my parents started complaining about money. Dad's small accounting business was struggling, and Mom had retired early from her teaching job due to health issues. They talked constantly about how expensive everything had become, how the property taxes kept rising, how maintenance on an older house was endless and costly. During one holiday visit, I overheard them discussing the possibility of selling the house and moving into something smaller. The conversation stuck with me. This wasn't just their house, it was part of our family history. It was where we had all grown up, where countless memories had been made. Despite my complicated feelings about my parents, I couldn't shake the idea that maybe I could help preserve that piece of our past. Over the next few months, I did extensive research. I looked at the property's value, the current mortgage balance, and what my parents might realistically get if they sold. The house was worth approximately $480,000, and they still owed about $120,000 on their mortgage. If they sold, after fees and commissions, they would probably walk away with around $330,000, enough for a comfortable retirement, but not extraordinary. Then I had an idea that seemed perfect at the time. What if I bought the house from them? I could pay off their mortgage and give them enough money to buy a smaller, more manageable place outright. They would have the financial freedom they needed, and the house would stay in the family. I could rent it back to them at a minimal rate until they were ready to move, or I could eventually move back to Portland myself. The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. I spent weeks running the numbers, consulting with a financial advisor, and preparing my proposal. I had saved aggressively and invested wisely. Combined with my excellent credit, I could make this work. In my mind, this was going to be my grand gesture, the way I could finally contribute to the family in a meaningful way that would be recognized and appreciated. I decided to present my offer during Thanksgiving dinner. I had prepared a simple folder with all the details, a fair market offer for the house, terms that would allow them to stay as long as they wanted, and calculations showing how much financial freedom this would give them. I was nervous but excited. This felt like something that could finally shift our family dynamic, show them that I had become someone who could provide the kind of support they had always given my siblings. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and I drove down from Seattle with my carefully prepared folder. The house smelled like turkey and stuffing, exactly as it had every Thanksgiving of my childhood. Marcus was there with his new girlfriend, and Natalie had brought her fiancé, Derek. Everyone seemed in good spirits as we gathered around the dining room table. After dinner, as we sat around with coffee and pie, I cleared my throat and pulled out my folder. I have something I would like to discuss with everyone, I began, trying to keep my voice steady despite my nerves. Mom and Dad, I know you have been stressed about finances and maintaining this house. I have been thinking about it a lot, and I would like to make you an offer. I want to buy the house from you. The room fell silent. My father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. My mother's eyes widened. Marcus and Natalie exchanged confused glances. I continued quickly, opening the folder and spreading the documents on the table. I can offer you a fair market price, $480,000. That would pay off your remaining mortgage and give you about $360,000 to work with after closing costs. You could buy a smaller place outright, have no monthly housing payment, and have money left over for retirement. And if you want, you can continue living here and just pay utilities until you find your next place. I have already been pre-approved for the financing. I looked around the table, expecting surprise, maybe even gratitude. Instead, I saw something I hadn't anticipated: anger. My mother was the first to speak, her voice tight. Absolutely not. I blinked, confused. What do you mean? I mean no, Victoria. We are not selling you this house. Her face had flushed red, a sign I knew meant she was genuinely upset. But Mom, this would solve your financial problems. You have been saying for months how stressed you are about money. My father set down his fork with deliberate care. Victoria, this is our home. We're not selling it to anyone, least of all to our own daughter. It would be inappropriate. Inappropriate? I felt my own frustration rising. How is it inappropriate? I'm offering you a fair price and flexible terms. This is a good deal. Marcus jumped in, his voice defensive. It's weird, Vic. Why would you want to buy your parents' house? Are you trying to show off how much money you're making? I'm not showing off, I protested. I'm trying to help. By making Mom and Dad your tenants? Natalie added, shaking her head. That's not help, that's humiliating. I felt like I had been slapped. This wasn't at all how I imagined this conversation going. They would stay as guests, as family. This isn't about control. It's about preserving our family home while giving you financial freedom. My mother stood abruptly, her hands trembling. We don't need your charity, Victoria. We have raised 3 children in this house, paid our mortgage for decades, and we are perfectly capable of managing our own affairs. The suggestion that we need you to swoop in and rescue us is insulting. But you have been saying you might need to sell, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. That's our decision to make, my father said firmly. Not yours. We appreciate that you are doing well financially, but that doesn't give you the right to try to take over our lives. I looked around the table, desperate for someone to understand. Marcus was avoiding my eyes. Natalie looked uncomfortable but said nothing in my defense. Their partners looked mortified to be witnessing this family argument. If you're doing so well for yourself, why don't you go buy your own house? My mother continued, her voice dripping with a coldness I had rarely heard directed at me. Leave ours alone. The rest of the evening was painfully awkward. I left early, the folder with my carefully prepared offer still sitting rejected on the dining room table. On the long drive back to Seattle, I cried angry, confused tears. I had genuinely thought I was helping, offering a solution that would benefit everyone. Instead, I felt rejected and misunderstood yet again. But I couldn't let go of the idea. Over the next few weeks, I researched more. I learned that my parents had missed several property tax payments and were actually in more financial trouble than they had let on. The house was at risk of a tax lien. With this information, my desire to help intensified, but I knew I couldn't approach them directly again. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I contacted the county tax office and paid their overdue property taxes directly, approximately $8,000. It was anonymous. They wouldn't know it was me. Then I did something more drastic. I researched their mortgage holder and their financial situation more thoroughly using public records. What I discovered shocked me. They weren't just struggling. They were 3 months behind on mortgage payments. The bank had already begun foreclosure proceedings. My parents were weeks away from losing the house entirely, and they hadn't told anyone. I realized that my Thanksgiving offer, while rejected, might soon become their only option. But I couldn't wait for them to ask for help, not when their pride had already caused them to refuse once. So I did something controversial. I contacted their mortgage company directly. Through a series of negotiations over the next 2 months, I worked out an arrangement with the bank. I would pay off the remaining mortgage balance in full, approximately $120,000, plus the back payments and penalties. In exchange, the title would be transferred to me and the foreclosure would be stopped. The bank was happy to avoid the foreclosure process, which is costly and time-consuming for them. My parents would be notified after the fact that their mortgage had been satisfied and the title transferred. I knew this was a massive step, possibly one my parents would see as an overreach. But I also knew that if I didn't act, they would lose the house anyway, and they would have nothing. At least this way, the house stayed in the family, and I could let them continue living there. I planned to tell them eventually, once the dust settled, and hopefully they would understand I had been trying to help. The title transfer was completed in mid-February. I officially owned my childhood home. My parents, as far as they knew, had simply received a notice that their mortgage was paid in full by an anonymous benefactor. I heard through Natalie that they were confused but relieved, speculating that perhaps it was a mistake or some kind of grace from the bank. They never suspected it was me. I planned to tell them eventually, to sit down and explain what I had done and why. But I wanted to wait for the right moment, when things were less tense. That moment never came the way I expected. In late March, I received a text from Natalie asking if I was coming home for Easter. I replied that I was planning to. Her response was odd. You might want to call Mom first. I called my mother that evening. Her voice was cold from the moment she answered. Victoria, I think it's best if you don't come for Easter this year. We need some family time without any tension. I was stunned. Tension? What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Your offer to buy the house caused a lot of hurt feelings. Your father and I have discussed it, and we think you need to reflect on appropriate boundaries with family. It's best if you skip this holiday. For several seconds, I couldn't form words. Are you uninviting me to Easter? We're asking you to give us some space. Maybe we can try again over the summer. I felt a familiar childhood feeling, being excluded, being deemed too problematic, being asked to accommodate everyone else's comfort. But this time was different. This time, I owned the house they were asking me to stay away from. The irony was almost laughable. They were telling me I couldn't come home for Easter when, legally, it was my home they were living in. I need to tell you something, I said, my voice shaking. The mortgage payoff? That wasn't the bank's mistake or grace. That was me. I paid off your mortgage. The house is in my name now. I bought it to save it from foreclosure, to keep it in the family. Silence on the other end. Then, my mother's voice, tight and furious. What did you just say? I explained everything. The overdue taxes I had paid, the foreclosure proceedings, the negotiations with the bank, and the title transfer. I did this to help you, to save the house. You were going to lose it anyway. You had no right, she hissed. How dare you go behind our backs? This is our house. It was your house, I corrected, surprised by the steel in my own voice. Now it's mine. And before you say anything else, you should know that I still want you to stay there. I wasn't planning to kick you out. I was trying to help. My mother's response was immediate and cutting. We don't want your help. We don't want anything from you. You have completely violated our trust and our privacy. Your father, and I need time to figure out what to do next, but I can tell you right now that we don't want you here for Easter. You are not welcome in this family right now. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my Seattle apartment, staring at my phone, processing what had just happened. My attempt to help had backfired spectacularly. My family saw me not as a rescuer, but as a manipulator who had stolen their home. And now I was officially uninvited, banned from family gatherings in a house that I legally owned. The next few weeks were chaos. My father called, his voice controlled but angry, demanding to know every detail of what I had done. Marcus sent accusatory texts saying I had always been jealous of not being the favorite and that this was my way of exerting control. Natalie was the only one who seemed conflicted, saying she understood I was trying to help but that I had gone about it the wrong way. My parents consulted with an attorney about their options. The attorney confirmed what I already knew. The transaction was legal. The bank had the right to negotiate with a third party to satisfy the debt, and the title transfer was properly executed. My parents could sue me to try to reverse it, but it would be costly, time-consuming, and their chances of success were minimal. They had been in default. I had prevented foreclosure. Legally, I was on solid ground. But family relationships aren't governed by legal contracts. My parents felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. To them, I had proven that I thought I was better than them, that I saw them as charity cases, that I had violated their autonomy in the most fundamental way by taking ownership of their home without their knowledge or consent. Easter came and went without me. I spent it alone in my apartment, eating takeout Chinese food and wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I had acted with good intentions, but I had also acted unilaterally, making a massive decision that affected their lives without including them in the process. Was I any different from the parents who had always made me feel excluded and undervalued? In late April, I received a formal letter from my parents' attorney. It outlined a proposal. I would sell the house back to them at cost, everything I had paid including the back taxes, mortgage payoff, and closing costs. They would finance it through a new mortgage. In exchange, they would acknowledge that I had prevented foreclosure and we could attempt to move forward as a family. I stared at the letter for a long time. This was my chance to undo what I had done, to give them back their dignity and autonomy. But it was also a chance to let them continue in their pattern of financial instability, to risk the house ending up in foreclosure again when they struggled with the new mortgage payments. I called a family meeting, insisting that everyone needed to be present. Reluctantly, they agreed. I drove to Portland on a Saturday morning in early May, my stomach in knots. When I arrived at the house, my house, the atmosphere was glacial. My parents sat on the couch, my father's arm around my mother's shoulders in a protective stance. Marcus and Natalie sat in chairs, flanking them like guards. Their attorney was there too, a middle-aged woman with a briefcase and a professional, but cold demeanor. I sat in the remaining chair, feeling outnumbered and under attack before anyone had spoken a word. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," I began. "I know this situation has been painful for everyone. I want to explain my perspective and then hear yours. Then, hopefully, we can find a solution that works for all of us." My mother's expression remained stony, but she nodded slightly. I took a deep breath and began. When I offered to buy the house at Thanksgiving, I genuinely thought I was presenting a good solution to a problem you had expressed. When you rejected that offer, I respected your decision and didn't push. But then I discovered through public records that the situation was much worse than you had let on. You weren't just considering selling, you were in foreclosure. My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "I understand now that what I did next was wrong in how I did it. I should have come to you, told you what I had discovered, and offered to help in a transparent way. Instead, I acted unilaterally because I was afraid you would reject my help again out of pride. I thought if I just solved the problem quietly, we could deal with the emotional aspects later. I was wrong about that." Marcus leaned forward. "So, you admit you shouldn't have done it?" "I admit I shouldn't have done it the way I did it," I clarified. "But I don't regret preventing the foreclosure. If I hadn't acted, you would have lost the house entirely. At least this way, it stayed in the family, and I always planned to let you continue living here." "You took away our home," my mother said, her voice breaking slightly. "You made us tenants in the place we have lived for 35 years. How can you not see how violating that is?" "I do see it now," I said softly. "And I'm sorry for that violation. But I need you to see something too. For my entire life, I have.